All right, it gives me pleasure this evening to welcome our first panelist. Welcome, Eduardo. Eduardo Samaniego is a Holy Hampshire College student trustee. He's currently working in the Five College campus ministry, and he's also a youth organizer with the Pioneer Valley Workers Committee. Eduardo came highly recommended from some connections of ours at rethinkingschools.org, and welcome and thank you for coming out on a Sunday evening.
No, I'm so glad to be here.
So I think we're going to start with a couple of questions that we have for Eduardo, and then we're going to open up for questions from the participants. So Eduardo, can you just give us a sort of historical overview of how the Dreamers legislation or attempted legislation sort of then turned into DACA and sort of what's happened over the last couple of years?
Yes, absolutely. The history of the DREAM Act, it goes back 17 years. It first started in 2001. Senator Dick Durbin introduced what was called the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act was a piece of legislation that was introduced first in the Senate and that was assigned to create a path to citizenship to what are those called now Dreamers and now who qualify for DACA. What this DREAM Act was supposed to do was include those who came here before the age of 16 years old and who were under 31 years old at the time to, again, have a path to become citizenships in the United States. I think it provided at the time a path for 5 years to become residents, and then in another 5 years they would have access to apply for citizenship in the United States. So unfortunately, this program, the DREAM Act legislation, never passed the House and the Senate. It wasn't until 2010 when it really became a very important piece of legislation that divided, the House and the Senate. In 2010, after the landslide win of Barack Obama, the DREAM Act became so important that it actually passed the House of Representatives with bipartisan, overwhelming support. And then it went on to the Senate, and that's when it really became tricky because at the time the Senate was controlled by Democrats, and unfortunately it got 55 votes in the Senate, but it was eventually shut down by a group of 5 senators who were Democrats at the time who voted against the DREAM Act. So that was in 2010, and so at that moment, the stakes could not be higher, and the pressure continued to be on those senators and representatives to pass something to help those who considered America their home, their only home, who were the Dreamers. So then we come to 2012 when Barack Obama is running for re-election. And, time and time again, he said that he couldn't do anything on his own because of different reasons. But eventually, after, countless of civil disobediences and a lot of pressure from these young students who were risking deportations, many of them were deported, many of them were arrested, and many of the offices of the re-election campaign of Barack Obama. And so that's really when he decided to address the situation, and he declared that he would that he would instruct the Department of Homeland Security through an official memorandum. So it was just a direction. It was not something that in general we call an executive order. It was just a directive to the Department of Homeland Security to establish a new plan so students who came here before the age of 16 that had no criminal record whatsoever and who were under the age of 31 years old and who came here into the United States before 2007 could actually qualify for what is a work permit. And that work permit would allow them to work legally in the United States and also a social security number. And in most states, the social security number provides a way for them to apply for a driver's license. There was a few states that actually fought, to not allow Dreamers and the DACA students to have driver's licenses, most notably Arizona, and eventually lost in court. But now through DACA, they have the social security number, a permit to drive, and a permit to, the driver's license, and a permit to work legally in the United States. So yes.
So who qualified for this DACA program initially?
Yes, so more specifically, like I was saying, these students that qualified for DACA, had to have entered the United States before 2007. I actually myself I am an immigrant and I came here legally, but I did not qualify. I eventually lost my status living here on my own without my family, and I could not qualify for DACA, and I don't qualify for DACA today because I came after I was 16 years old. So I was already 16 years old when I entered the country, and so I don't qualify for that. So you have to have been, under 16 before I entered the country for 2007, be under 31 years old, and don't have a criminal record. So those are some of the major, things that you had to have in order to qualify for DACA.
So, and then we had, you mentioned about 800,000, I think you said?
Yes. Yes. So, it varies how many students there is who qualify for DACA across the United States. Today, in the state of Massachusetts, it's actually about 10,000 students who qualify for DACA. And so, as we were discussing earlier today, there has been a serious, negative, effect, to those who qualify for this permit, because in September 5th, Jeff Sessions, who was the Attorney General of the United States, announced that he was rescinding DACA over the next 6 months, right? So what this means is that he didn't end DACA outright on September 5th. He announced a series of steps that will lead to everyone who has DACA now to lose it eventually, if Congress does not act. So right now that this is a real and serious concern in our community, and because about in the meantime, if your work permit, that is a work permit for 2 years, was expired before October 5th of this year, and you didn't renew it, that's it. You cannot renew your permit. And over the next 6 months until March, that we have for DACA to be over, then students are going to lose about 30,000 students a month are going to lose their DACA. So, here we're talking about 30 students losing their ability to drive, 30,000 students losing their ability to drive themselves to school, to go to their places of worship, to go to work, and they also will lose their ability to work, because their work permit will also expire. So this is a real concern. And furthermore, once you don't have the DACA permit, you are very much, you gave your information to the U.S. government. These students trust it, right? After so much, so many students were fearful of giving their information to the government, but they eventually did it. Once they realized that they were safe. Now the government has their addresses. They know where they work. They know where they live, where their family lives, if they move. And they now, if they lose DACA, they pretty much have a target. They are a target for deportation. So,
and I think we were chatting earlier this evening that these people are not far away from us. They're people in our communities. They're family members. And as you mentioned earlier, you have children at school trying to write tests, trying to do schoolwork, and at the same time, they're not sure if their parents will be there when they get home at night. So I guess, Eduardo, from your perspective, as a member a community member, what can I do right now, tomorrow, this month?
Yes, so I think that it's one of the most important things to remember is that, this is not something that is over, right? And there is a lot of things that we can do, but the most important is definitely that we have to take action right now. And in the Senate right now, there is a piece of legislation called the 2017 DREAM Act. The 2017 DREAM Act is something that will address, the taking away of DACA. So right now, it was introduced by bipartisan support. So Senator Jeff Flake from Arizona, and Senator Chuck Schumer from New York, who is a Democrat, and Jeff Flake, a Republican, and Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, a very conservative state, and Dick Durbin from Illinois. The four of those have introduced the 2017 DREAM Act. And so there will be a national day of support on November 9th. That day, people will be tweeting, they will be calling their congressmen and their senators to support the 2017 piece of legislation introduced by Senator Jeff Flake and Chuck Schumer. So that day, people will be calling. There is thousands of people who will be actually traveling to Washington, D.C. There is students from across the country, from colleges, from churches, congregations, that will be traveling over to D.C. to make the case to pass the 2017 DREAM Act. So don't forget, November 9th is a day for national action for the DREAM Act.
Great, thank you. If you have any questions and you'd like to type them in the chat box, then Lily will call on you to ask your question. In the meantime, in our valley, we're situated in South Hadley, Western Massachusetts. Do you have any particular organizations, Eduardo, that you could perhaps share with us that people can get involved in right here in the valley?
Yes, so there is several organizations that have been very supportive of the Dreamers. One of them is the Pioneer Valley Workers Center that I actually work for. And they've had we've had a lot of support from, Just with Justice. They've been a real champion for the rights of those who are, dreamers and immigrants as a whole right now. Just with Justice, there is also the Americans for Service Committee. So, those are just only some of the organizations that are statewide and that you can go to, and they will direct you to, how to best take action. There is also, of course, local chapters throughout colleges that, people can organize events, they can go and support them at, and come out to their events and donate and things like that. So there is always an organization close by. It's just, up to you to look it up. And like I said, the Pioneer Valley Workers Center, Jobs with Justice, and American Friends Service Committee, student immigrant movement in Boston. You're located in Boston. So, those are some of the organizations that you could support.
Great, thank you.